Hello everyone, and welcome to the next edition of the Holland Land Office Museum's Artifact video series. My name is Ryan Duffy and I'm the director of the museum. And this week we're going to talk about the first family in one of Batavia's oldest industries, and that is the brewing industry. So today's topic will be the Fish family, specifically Libbeus and his son Eli Fish. Now you may be familiar with the name Eli Fish if you're around Batavia today, as there's actually a local brewery now named after him that is reliving the tradition of brewing history in Batavia. So next time you're in Batavia, feel free to stop by the Eli Fish Brewery and you can fancy their wares, though they might be a little different than what the original Eli Fish would have had back in the 19th century. Now the story of the Fish family in Batavia begins in 1806 when Libbeus Fish arrives from Vermont, and by 1814 he'd actually purchased property on East Main Street. Now his son Eli, who we connect more so with the brewing tradition, was born the year after they arrived at Batavia in 1807. Now Libbeus begins his brewing tradition in 1827 when he builds his first malt house on what is today Elm Street. This was a small wooden building with some limited capacity for storage of various alcoholic beverages. However, it was big enough to satisfy the needs of Batavia at the time, as it was still a rather small village, though it was growing ever rapidly. However, Libbeus had his production be able to grow over time to accommodate the demands of the growing Batavia populace. Libbeus's business would flourish over time, and he would become a man of means, and he would invest many of the monies gained into other projects around Batavia, as well as to local charities in order to support the community. Now Libbeus would die in 1859 and would leave the business to his son Eli. Now Eli would take over the business actually in 1835 and would continue with the business in and out at some points until his death in 1879. Eli's first foray into the business lasted until 1862, and by 1860 he had grown his father's business to the extent that they were producing 8,000 barrels a year, which was quite a significant amount at the time. In 1862, Eli sold the business to a firm called Boyle & Smith, and they operated the malt house and brewery until it burnt down in 1864. After that fire, the company reverted back to Eli. However, a year later, after the rebuild, the brewery burnt down again. Undeterred, Eli built another malt house on the spot and operated that until 1871. That year, he gained a partner in R.A. Maxwell, and then Fish actually left the company and the firm became Maxwell and Ensign. However, in 1872, the buildings burnt down again, but were rebuilt the following year by Mr. Fish. Soon after that, Fish gained a new partner in A.H. King, who would continue on the business after Eli. Fish would remain partners with King until 1876, when Fish was bought out and the firm went exclusively over to King. Yet again, the brewery burnt down to the ground in 1883, but was rebuilt by King and was actually able to double the production that it had done previously under Fish. And by 1886, they were able to turn 80,000 bushels of barley into malt ale. Fish not only had his own malt house and brewery, he had his own vaults where he stored his ingredients, and these he built in 1857 near the brewery. However, in 1880, these were bought by William Gamble and converted over to his brewing purposes after Eli Fish's death. And it was from these beginnings that Gamble would actually create the Batavia Brewing Company that would go on to grow into the 20th century. Eli Fish would follow in his father's footsteps in terms of his civic interests, as he would play a part in politics and other business investments throughout his life. He also served as a captain in the 164th Regiment during the mid-19th century, and was also the vice president of the Bank of Genesee, and was one of the first investors into the Wire Plow Company when it was looking to come to Batavia, and was also a leading member of a petroleum company based out of Batavia that looked to buy oil wells down in Pennsylvania. So he had a myriad of interests outside of his brewing career. Now, Eli Fish is probably the name that has been attached to the brewing history of Batavia, but is not the only one, as you have William Gamble, you have the Crickler Company, as well as the Eager Company, all spring up during the latter parts of the 19th century and into the 20th century. But the first family of Batavia brewing is definitely the Fish family. And it is now their name that lives on through the current brewing company that resides on Main Street in Batavia, trying to revitalize the name. Though not much is known outside of this of Eli Fish's life, though we do know that he is buried in the Batavia Cemetery on Harvester Ave. But outside of his professional life, little is known of his personal life. We do know that he was married twice during his time here in Batavia, but did have several children. However, outside of that, his records don't show up too great amount. But early Batavians do have him to thank for keeping their whistles wetted and the beer flowing, as we say, and that's always a good way to keep everybody happy. So we must raise a glass to Eli Fish and thank him for his wonderful brew and the tradition that he helped begin here in Batavia. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. It's one of many of our Artifact video series. In case you've missed any, you can go back and check them out on our channel, Holland Land Office Museum. And we hope that you join us in the future as we'll keep pumping these out week